I bought a BMW not too long ago. I walked into the dealership in Delray Beach. I told the salesperson exactly which model I wanted and put a deposit down before one had even arrived on the lot. I waited 4 months for the call. Now, I'm not telling you this to brag about a car. I'm telling you because of what didn't happen. I didn't walk in confused. I didn't need the salesperson to explain what BMW makes or how their lineup works. I already knew. I'd owned BMWs before, some used, some new, and I'd moved through the range over the years, a 3 Series, 5 Series. I understood where each model sat. I knew what I was graduating to and why. The brand had been showing me the ladder my entire adult life. And that's what a good brand does. It doesn't just sell you one product, it shows you the whole architecture. It says, here's where you are, and here's where you could go when you're ready. You could dream inside that brand. And when the moment comes, when you've got the money or the occasion or just the desire, you already know exactly what the next step looks like. Now, let's contrast that with what happens at the grocery store. You're walking through a grocery store. You pass through the beverage aisle. There's sodas, waters, energy drinks. And then you turn into the wine section. At the Publix that's near my house, these aisles are literally next to each other. Same grocery store, same commercial distribution system, same retail constraints. But they're just completely different universes in every sense of the word. In the non alcoholic beverage aisle, you know exactly where you are. So Coca Cola owns this section and that section. Pepsi owns those shelves over there. You can see the family relationship: Coke, Sprite, Fanta, Dasani, Smart Water. They're visually connected. You understand the architecture. If you want something fancier than Dasani, you grab Smart Water. If you want something trendier, you grab a Topo Chico. The latter, it's visible. Now walk into the wine aisle. Chaos. 500 bottles with 500 different labels, 500 different fonts, 500 different stories that have nothing to do with each other. You see Josh, you see Naomi, you see Robert Mondavi, you see something called The Prisoner. You see Barefoot next to Orange Swift next to some French thing that you can't pronounce. What you don't see, what you can't possibly see, is that many of these bottles are owned by the very same company. There's a ladder here buried inside the chaos. Someone, somewhere, built a portfolio that can take you from a $12 bottle to a $200 bottle. They just decided not to tell you about it. And I think that is a massive mistake. I call this the Josh problem. Now, to be completely fair to those of you who've come into my shop, Preface Wine in Delray Beach, Florida, you may know our GM is named Josh, and I promise you I am talking about a totally different Josh problem. So let's just focus on the wine named Josh. So, Josh Cellars is one of the most successful wine brands in America. It sells millions of cases a year. It's in every grocery store, every Costco, every Target with a wine section. For a lot of people, Josh is where they start, and that's great. Seriously, I'm not here to trash Josh. An approachable, affordable, widely available wine that brings people into the category, that's a win. The problem is what happens next. Because Josh, it's a dead end. You buy Josh, you like it, you buy it again, and then you think, okay, I'm ready for something a little nicer, something to impress someone, something for a special occasion. Where do you go? Well, they have some regional wines they call Reserve, but these are like $20 at the store. It's hardly a special occasion wine. There's no flagship at the top of the Josh lineup that you can aspire to. The brand, it just ends. So, you're on your own. You have to start over, learn a new name, figure out a whole new brand, navigate the chaos of the wine aisle with no guide, no continuity, no relationship to build on. And most people, they just don't. Most people, they just keep buying Josh, or they get frustrated and they just give up on wine entirely. And here's the thing that absolutely astounds me: Josh is owned by Constellation Brands. And do you know what else Constellation owns? Robert Mondavi. That's a step up. The Prisoner? That's another step up. Cultish, cool label, $50. It's not my personal cup of tea, but certainly what heads into real wine territory. And Schrader. They own Schrader Cellars. $200 starting point on the brand. Napa Cult Cabernet as you climb inside Schrader. They only sell magnums of their flagship, Old Sparky, at $1,500 a pop off of a mailing list that's hard to crack. And that wine's a phenomenal treat. Schrader is one of the most sought after wines in California. The latter, it exists. Josh to Mondavi to Prisoner to Schrader. That's a journey. That's a path from $12 to $200 to $1,500, all within the same corporate family. But nobody drinking Josh has any idea. There's no connection. Look, there's no storytelling. There's no when you're ready, here's where you go. So while Constellation owns the whole ladder, they just don't tell anyone it exists. Now, let me show you how other industries handle this because this is really not terribly complicated. It's actually just brand building 101, and it's not just cars. Okay. Take Mercedes Benz. You can buy a C Class for around $45,000. It's a nice car, it's an everyday luxury. But here's the genius: when you buy that C Class, you know the S Class exists. You know there's a flagship, $120,000 of German engineering waiting for you when you're ready. Same thing I experienced with BMW. You can dream inside the brand. The C Class, it isn't just a transaction, it's the beginning of a relationship. Mercedes knows where you are and shows you where you can go. Every time you see an S Class on the road, you are seeing your future self. The brand, it's taking you somewhere. Watches, they're even better at this. So, Rolex, they sell an Oyster Perpetual for around $7,000. That's the entry point. But the Submariner exists, the GMT Master exists, the Day Date, the President exists at 40,000 plus. You can start with Rolex and you could spend a lifetime moving up the ladder, all within that same brand. And here's the really clever part: Tudor. Tudor is Rolex's sister brand. Same parent company, same quality obsession, but more accessible price points. A Tudor Black Bay is $3,000 or $4,000. And everyone who buys one knows that Tudor is the gateway to Rolex. It's explicit. It's part of the marketing. The brands talk to each other. Buy a Tudor, dream of a Rolex. That's the deal, and it works. Now, here's the thing that really gets me. There's a company that actually does this brilliantly, and it's in wine. Well, champagne, LVMH. Take Veuve Clicquot. You know the yellow label. That's the entry point. 50, 60, $70 for non-vintage. But when there's vintage releases, which sit for longer and cost more, and at the top they have the Grand Dame. It's their prestige cuvee. It's 200 plus. It's the same house. It's a clear ladder. It's just rungs that you can see. Dom Perignon. They do the same exact thing. The standard vintage release is already expensive. It's a couple $100. And then there's P2, Plenitude 2, which has aged on the lees for 16 plus years, and P3, which has aged 25 plus years. Each step is more time, more rarity, and more money. And collectors, they know exactly where they are on that ladder. And guess what? LVMH owns both of these houses. They built the ladders. They made the architecture visible. They gave people somewhere to dream toward. So look, it can be done with wine. It is being done by one of the biggest luxury companies in the world. The question is, why does American wine refuse to learn the lesson? Now imagine if Rolex did what most wine does. Imagine if they sold Tudor with completely different branding, never mentioning the Rolex connection, and just hope you figured out the ladder yourself. That would be insane. You'd lose customers at the bottom who don't know where to go next, and then you lose aspirational energy from people who can't see what they're working toward. You turn a relationship into a transaction. And yet, that's exactly what American wine does every single day on purpose. Now, I can imagine what some people in the wine industry would say. They'd say, well, it's different for us. We have the 3-tier system. We don't control our own distribution. We can't build flagship stores. We're at the mercy of distributors and retailers. And guess what? Some of that carping is true. Wine distribution in America is complicated. Wineries sell to distributors, distributors sell to retailers, retailers sell to you. The producer is 2 steps removed from the customer. But here's the thing. Coca-Cola faces the same constraints. Coca-Cola doesn't own grocery stores. They go through bottlers. They go through distributors. They rely on retailers for shelf placement. They don't control the environment where you encounter their product. And yet, when you walk down the beverage aisle, you know exactly who owns what. Coca-Cola, Sprite, Fanta, Dasani, Smartwater, Topo Chico, Minute Maid. You see the family. The architecture is visible. The ladder is legible. Dasani is fine. Smartwater is fancier. Topo Chico is trendy. You understand the tiers without anyone explaining it to you. Pepsi Company, they do the same thing. Pepsi, Gatorade, Tropicana, Aquafina, Bubbly. Different products, different price points, but you can see the portfolio. You understand you are choosing within a family. Same aisle, same distribution challenges, same retail constraints. Walk 50 feet to the wine section, and it is chaos. Gallo, they own Barefoot and Apothic and William Hill and Orange Swift, and that's everything from $6 to $50, but you would have no idea. The brands, they look completely different. There is no visual connection. There's no story. There's no ladder. Coca-Cola proves it could be done. Wine just chooses not to. So, who pays the price for this? Everyone. Consumers get stuck. They find a brand they like, Josh, Maomi, Barefoot, whatever, and then they don't know what to take on next. So they're either at entry level forever or they get frustrated and leave and try another beverage entirely. The wine industry spends all this energy acquiring customers at the bottom of the funnel and then loses them because there's no path upward. Consumers, they get intimidated. Without brand ladders, the only way up into wine is to learn an entirely new system. Regions and producers and vintages and appellations. You can't just graduate from entry level Mercedes to flagship Mercedes. You have to learn French and you have to learn Italian and you have to decode a wall of unfamiliar names with no guide. Luxury goods don't make you do that. A Mercedes owner doesn't need to study German engineering to know the S Class is the top. The brand does the work for you. Retailers get burdened because the brands don't build ladders, the retailer has to. A good wine shop employee becomes responsible for connecting dots that the producers themselves absolutely refuse to connect. You like Josh? Okay, well, let me tell you about some other options. That's labor. That's expertise. That's time. And most retailers, especially grocery stores, big box stores, places where most wine is actually sold, don't have the staff or the training to do it. Brands lose customers. This is the part that really baffles me. Constellation owns Josh and Schrader. They've already acquired the customer for $12. That customer is going to graduate eventually. They're going to want something nicer for an anniversary, a promotion, a special dinner. And instead of keeping the customer in the family, Constellation lets them wander off to some other producer because they never showed them the ladder. It's like Mercedes selling you a C Class and then refusing to mention that the S Class even exists. You'd buy a Porsche for your midlife crisis instead. Why would Mercedes do that to itself? I've been trying to figure out why the industry does this, and I think there's a few reasons. Okay, first, the high end wines don't want to be associated with the entry level wines. So Schrader certainly doesn't want to be known as Fancy Josh. There's a status anxiety there. It's a fear that connecting the brands would cheapen the premium product. But that's actually backward. Tudor isn't cheapened by its connection to Rolex, it's elevated. The association with the flagship gives the entry level brand aspirational energy, and the flagship gains a feeder system of customers who are already loyal. Second, the portfolio companies aren't really brand builders at all. They're holding companies. So Constellation acquired Josh. They acquired Prisoner. They acquired Schrader. They weren't built as a family. They were assembled through M&A. And nobody's done the work to stitch them into a coherent journey. That's a choice, and honestly, kind of a lazy one. LVMH is also a holding company. They acquired Moet, they acquired Dom Perignon, they acquired Veuve Clicquot, but they've done the work to make each house's ladder legible. You know what you're getting. You know where the top is. Third, wine has always relied on intermediaries to tell the story. So there's critics and sommeliers and retailers and YouTubers. The brands themselves haven't had to do the consumer education work because someone else did it for them. But that world is disappearing and it's really fractioning off. So critics matter less than they used to. Sommeliers only reach a tiny number of wine buyers. And the typical retail employee at a grocery store can't tell you the difference between Mayo and Mondavi. They certainly can't explain which one is a step up from which. The whole system is breaking down, and the brands have not built a single thing to replace it. So, what do we do? Well, if I could wave a magic wand at the industry, I'd tell the big portfolio companies to do the obvious thing: build the ladders, build the brands, tell people that Josh and Manavi and Prisoner and Schrader are a family. Create a visual language that connects them. Put Constellation Family on the label, the way that Coca-Cola Company appears on Smartwater. Give people somewhere to go. But turns out I'm not in charge of waving any wands, and I'm not holding my breath for the industry to change. So maybe we can start building those ladders ourselves. And that's part of what we're trying to do at our wine bar. Because the brands won't create these pathways, we end up creating them at a retail level. You like this? Here's the next step, and here's the next step after that. We are the ones who build the connective tissue that the industry refuses to build. Now, this really is where a good wine bar and a good retailer, a good sommelier becomes essential. Not just as recommendation engines, but as ladder builders. Guides who can look at someone drinking Josh and say, I see where you are. Let me just show you where you could go. So that's the job now, because the brands have never embraced it outside of some top brands offering second wines, still priced at hundreds of dollars. Honestly, this might just be the opportunity. So, if you're a wine bar or a retailer, a sommelier, an influencer, a consumer who loves Reddit and is looking for connection, this is where you create value that no one else is creating. The brands are leaving a huge gap and someone has to fill it. It might as well be people who actually care about the customer and love connecting with people in an emotional way, the way that luxury, fashion, and car brands do. Here's what I've been coming back to over and over again in my mind: wine is intimidating to people. We know this. Every survey says it, and every newcomer says it. The wall of unfamiliar labels, the foreign words, the fear of looking and feeling stupid, it's keeping people away. What do? Blame the consumers. We implicitly say, yeah, they should educate themselves, learn the regions, study the grapes, put in the work. But maybe the problem isn't the consumers. Maybe the problem is an industry that refuses to learn basic lessons from every other industry. Mercedes doesn't ask you to learn German engineering before buying a car, and Rolex doesn't require a degree in horology, and Coca Cola doesn't make you study supply chains to understand their portfolio. They build ladders. They show you where you are and where you can go. They make the architecture legible. Wine hides the ladders. Wine buries the architecture. Wine owns Josh and Schrader and doesn't tell anyone they're related. And then we wonder why people feel lost. When I walked into that BMW dealership, I knew exactly what I wanted. And it's not because I'm a car expert, because the brand had spent decades showing me the ladder. I could see where I was, where I'd been, and where I was going. Nobody walks into a wine aisle with that feeling, and they should. The ladders, they exist. Constellation owns Schrader, Gallo owns Orange Swift. The architecture is already built. Somebody just needs to turn on the lights.